দেখেন মানে পার্লামেন্টের কোনটা কেন পরে আসলে হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ বিপ্লবদার ল্যাটিন হ্যাঁ আমি তো ভাবছি যে সে আবার নাটক করে যাবে সে আবার না 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 অসুবিধা হয় নাই আমি তো রিসেন্টলি করে না অসুবিধা হয় আচ্ছা আপনি আসেন আসলে কথা বলবো আমি তাহলে ক্লাস শুরু করি আপনার হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ তো জানাচ্ছি আজকের লেকচারে তোমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছ আমাকে হ্যালো হ্যালো স্টুডেন্টস তোমরা আমাকে শুনতে পাচ্ছ হ্যালো স্নেহাশ্রী তুমি কি আছো স্নেহাশ্রী হ্যালো
আসসালামু আলাইকুম স্যার, শোনা যাচ্ছে।
ঠিক আছে তাহলে আমরা শুরু করি না আচ্ছা আমরা মোটামুটি স্প্রিং পর্যন্ত ডেভেলপমেন্টটা করেছিলাম দেখেছিলাম আজকে আমরা একটু রোটেশনটা দেখি হাউ that rotates therefore the development of midgut and colon here in the figures the growth of the GIT exceeds volume of abdominal cavity so the tube herniates through the umbilicus within the umbilicus here lies the umbilicus so when the growth of the GIT exceeds the volume of abdominal cavity then the part of the GIT herniates through the umbilical orifices. Here umbilical orifice, so through these orifices, the part GIT part. We here part of the GIT herniates through the umbilical orifice. So while herniation, the gut undergoes a primary rotation of 90-degree counterclockwise. And so this orientation, this is the counterclockwise rotation, the gut herniates. ঘড়ির কাঁটার উল্টা দিকে left orientation the gut herniates through the umbilical orifice. This is the primary rotation. This corresponds with the rotation of the stomach and positions the appendix on the left. So at first, due to counterclockwise rotation, the appendix takes the left position. The primary rotation also brings the right vagus nerve to the front. So it is sometimes the right vagus nerve is called anterior vagus nerve. With the growth of the embryo, with the further growth of the embryo, the abdominal cavity expands, thus drawing the herniated GIT back within the abdominal cavity and causing an additional secondary rotation. Here, secondary rotation, you can see the herniated gut again pulled back into the abdominal cavity. This is secondary rotation, and this occurs 180-degree counterclockwise. So, in this secondary rotation, the appendix positions in the right side. Appendix positions in the right side. This is the appendix. The appendix will be here, appendix in the left position, but here again it assumes its right position. Once in the abdominal cavity, the colon continues to grow in length, pushing the appendix to its final position in the lower right quadrant. So, in the final rotation, due to the growth of the colon pushes the appendix to its final position, the right lower quadrant. Here, the appendix again position in the right lower quadrant. So, note the attachment of the vitelline duct. Here is the vitelline duct to the gut at the region of the ileum. The region of the ileum, vitelline duct persists. The duct normally regresses. This vitelline duct normally regresses, but sometimes it persists. This vitelline duct may sometimes persist as mucous diverticulum. Mucous diverticulum may cause some pathological conditions such as Zollinger-Ellison syndrome, or it may cause also volvulus. So again, rotation of the gut. What we know that after the formation of the gut, the midgut loop lies outside the abdominal cavity, which we saw in the figures outside the abdominal cavity. Outside the abdominal cavity of the embryo, in a part of the extraembryonic xylem that persists near the extraembryonic xylem. The loop has a pre-arterial, that is and post-arterial distal segment. Pre-arterial or proximal and post-arterial or distal segment. Initially, the loop lies in the sagittal plane. Proximal segment being cranial and ventral to the distal segment. The midgut loop now undergoes rotation, which we already mentioned. This rotation plays a very important part in establishing the definitive relationship of various parts of the intestine. So the loop undergoes anti-clockwise rotation, which we show earlier by 90 degrees. The pre-arterial segment lies on the right and the post-arterial segment lies on the left. The pre-arterial segment undergoes great increase in length to form the coils of the jejunum and ileum. Loop still outside the abdominal cavity to the right of the distal limb. The coils of the jejunum and ileum, there is the proximal segment, return to the abdominal cavity. As they do so, the midgut loop undergoes further anti-clockwise rotation, which we shown earlier. The coils of the jejunum and ileum proximal segment return to the abdominal cavity. As they do so, the midgut loop undergoes further anti-clockwise rotation, while the jejunum and ileum pass behind the superior mesenteric artery into the left half of the abdominal cavity. Duodenum comes to lie behind the artery. The jejunum and ileum occupy the posterior and left part of the abdominal cavity. এখানে আমরা ছবিতে যেটা দেখিয়েছি আগে, the loop undergoes anti-clockwise rotation. Here, anti-clockwise rotation by 90 degrees, or here anti-clockwise rotation by 90 degrees, and then pre-arterial segment undergoes great increase in length. This prearterial segment. Prearterial segment increases by length. Here, prearterial segment increases by length to form the coils of jejunum and ileum. Here, jejunum and ileum coils are formed. The coils of the jejunum and ileum, which is the proximal portion, return to the abdominal cavity. As they do so, the midgut tube undergoes further anti-clockwise rotation. Here, further anti-clockwise rotation occurs at 180 degrees. The jejunum and ileum pass behind the superior mesenteric artery. This is the superior mesenteric artery. This is the aorta. This is superior mesenteric artery. This is superior mesenteric artery. Here is the superior mesenteric artery. So jejunum and ileum pass behind the superior mesenteric artery into the left half of the abdominal cavity. They occupy the left half of the abdominal cavity. Duodenum comes to lie behind the artery. Here the duodenum comes behind the artery. Duodenum behind the artery. The duodenum lies behind the superior mesenteric artery. The jejunum and ileum occupy the posterior and left part of the abdominal cavity. Then jejunum and ileum posterior and left part of the abdominal cavity. Here this is the appendix and this is the vitelline duct. So finally, the post-arterial segment of the midgut loop returns to the abdominal cavity. It also rotates in an anti-clockwise direction. With the result, the transverse column lies anterior to the superior mesenteric artery, and the cecum comes to lie on the right side, which we show in the figures. At this stage, the cecum lies below the liver, and an ascending column cannot be demarcated. Gradually, the cecum descends to the right iliac fossa, and the ascending, transverse, and descending parts of the column become distinct. Here, you see the cecum. Cecum lies below the liver. The cecum lies below the liver, and ascending, the ascending column, transverse column, descending column. But ascending column, especially in this stage, here the cecum, this is the liver. The cecum lies below the liver, but in this stage, the ascending column cannot be demarcated. Gradually, the cecum descends to the right iliac fossa. Here, the cecum descends to the right iliac fossa, and the ascending, this is the ascending, this is the transverse, and descending column are now demarcated. Then fixation of the gut. At first, all parts of the small and large intestines have a mesentery by which they are suspended from the posterior abdominal wall. After the completion of the rotation of the gut, the duodenum, ascending column, descending column, and the rectum becomes retroperitoneal as they got fused to the posterior abdominal wall with these mesenteries. So they are retroperitoneal. So these structures, the duodenum, ascending column, descending column, and rectum, are retroperitoneal due to the fusion of their mesenteries with the posterior abdominal wall. The original mesentery persists as the mesentery of the small intestine, the transverse mesocolon, the pelvic mesocolon, or sigmoid mesocolon. Pelvic mesocolon is known as sigmoid mesocolon. So cecal bud is derived from the post-arterial segment of the midgut. The cecum and the appendix are formed by the enlargement of this midgut. Post-arterial segment of the midgut. The proximal part of the cecal bud grows rapidly to form the cecum. Distal part of the cecal bud remains narrow and forms the appendix. We shown in the figure. The appendix arises from the apex of the cecum. And this is the apex of the cecum, and this is the appendix. And this is the cecum, apex of the cecum. Appendix arises. The appendix arises from the apex of the cecum. The lateral or the right wall of the cecum grows much more rapidly than the medial or the left wall. The right wall grows rapidly than the left wall. The point of attachment of the appendix with cecum comes to lie on the medial side. This attachment of the appendix with the cecum lies at the medial side. This is the cecum, this is the conform. So now anomalies of the gut. There are few anomalies may be observed during birth or during development of the GIT. These may be observed. What are these? These are the congenital obstruction, abnormal communication or fistula, duplication, diverticular, formation of diverticular, errors of rotation, errors of fixation, and situs inversus. These are a few abnormalities during development of GIT. So, why these obstruction, congenital obstruction may occur? This may be due to a variety of causes such as atresia. What is atresia? Atresia is the continuity of the lumen is interfered by a segment of the gut. If the segment of the gut is missing during the development, or may be replaced by fibrous tissue or by a septum which can block the lumen, so there may be atresia. So why atresia occurs? If the continuity of the lumen is interfered by a segment of the gut which is missing during the development, or may be replaced by fibrous band of tissue or by a septum block of the lumen. So there may be stenosis, that is the abnormal narrowing of the gut, non-development of the nerve plexus, which we already seen in Hirschsprung or Omphalocoele disease, abnormal thickening of the muscular wall, which may cause congenital pylori stenosis, which we shown earlier, external pressure by abnormal band or abnormal blood vessels, which is known as a vascular accident, the band seen in relation to the duodenum or compressed by annular pancreas, which we showed in the figures earlier, and there may be imperforate anals. Imperforate anals may be caused by stenosis or atresia of the lower part of the rectum or anal cavity. There may be abnormal communication which will create fistula. What is fistula? Fistula is an abnormal communication with other cavities or with the surface of the body, such as with the skin. The fistula are most frequently seen in relation to the esophagus and the rectum, and usually associated with atresia of the normal vessel. There may be tracheoesophageal fistula. That is, the trachea may communicate with the esophagus, creating tracheoesophageal fistula due to developmental anomaly. Incomplete septation of the cloaca, that is, incomplete division of the cloaca. The rectum may communicate with the urinary bladder. The rectum may also communicate with the urethra, with the vagina, or rectum may be open onto the perineum at an abnormal site. These conditions are associated with imperforate anus. There may be duplication of the various parts of the GIT, such as due to varying length of the intestinal tract may be duplicated. The duplication may form only a small cyst or may be considerable length, or it may or may not communicate with the rest of the intestine. These are the congenital anomalies. Now there may be congenital abnormal position of the appendix. If the cecum adheres to the inferior surface of the liver when it returns to the abdomen, it will be drawn superiorly as the liver diminishes in size as a result of cecum remains in its fetal position. If the cecum adheres to the inferior surface, আমরা যেটা ডেভেলপমেন্টের সময় দেখলাম যে সিকামটা প্রথমে লিভারের নিচে থাকে, সাবঅ্যাকুয়াটিক পজিশনে সিকাম থাকে, পরে যখন অ্যাবডোমেন আরো বড় হতে থাকে বা জিআইটি বড় হতে থাকে তখন আস্তে আস্তে নিচের দিকে নেমে আসে এবং অ্যাসেন্ডিং কোলন, ট্রান্সভার্স কোলন, ডিসেন্ডিং কোলনটা ইনডিস্টিংক্ট। কিন্তু যদি কোনো কারণে সিকাম লিভারের সাথে লেগে থাকে, অ্যাডহেয়ার হয়ে থাকে, then when it returns to the abdomen, it will be drawn superiorly as the liver diminishes in size. লিভারটা যখন ছোট হতে থাকবে তখন সেই সিকামটাকে উপরে টেনে নিয়ে যাবে, যদি সিকাম লিভারের সাথে অ্যাডহেয়ার হয়ে থাকে। As a result, remains in its fetal position. তাহলে এটা সাবঅ্যাকুয়াটিক পজিশনে সিকামটা থেকে যাবে। তো সেখানে তখন অ্যাপেন্ডিক্সটা বড় সিকামের সাথে ওই জায়গায় থেকে যাবে, সাবঅ্যাকুয়াটিক অ্যাপেন্ডিক্স। The subhepatic cecum and subhepatic appendix may be seen in adults and create a problem in the diagnosis of appendicitis and during the surgical removal of the appendix. এই প্রবলেমটা হয় যদি সাবহেপাটিক পজিশনে সিকাম থাকে বা সাবহেপাটিক পজিশনে অ্যাপেন্ডিক্স থাকে, তাহলে অ্যাপেন্ডিসাইটিসের পেইন যেখানে হওয়ার কথা আমরা সাধারণত রাইট ইলিয়াক ফোসার ওখানে ম্যাকবার্নিস টেন্ডারলেস দেখি, এটা দিয়ে আমরা ডায়াগনোসিস করতে পারি যেটা অ্যাপেন্ডিসাইটিস হচ্ছে, কিন্তু সিকামটা যদি সাবহেপাটিক বা পোস্টহেপাটিক পজিশনে যদি থেকে যায় সেক্ষেত্রে কিন্তু আমরা বার্নিস পয়েন্টের ইউজুয়াল সাইটে টেন্ডারনেস পাই না, এই কারণে আমরা অনেক সময় অ্যাপেন্ডিসাইটিস ডায়াগনোসিস করতে পারি। বা অ্যাপেন্ডিসাইটিস ডায়াগনোসিস করার পরেও ডিউরিং সার্জারি অ্যাপেন্ডিক্সটা খুঁজে পাওয়া যায় না, অনেক সময় মিসিং হয়ে যায়। এই ধরনের প্রবলেমগুলো সার্জিক্যাল প্রবলেম রাইজ করে ডিউ টু অ্যাবনর্মাল পজিশন অফ দ্য। তো তোমাদের বইতে আরেকটা ফিগার দেওয়া আছে যে অ্যাপেন্ডিক্সের আরো কি কি অ্যাবনর্মাল পজিশন হতে পারে, রেট্রোসিকাল পজিশন হতে পারে, তারপরে হচ্ছে টিনিয়া লাইবেরা তৈরি করে সেটার সাথে অ্যাপেন্ডিক্স ব্যান্ড হয়ে দিতে পারে। আরো কিছু অ্যাবনর্মাল পজিশন বলতে দেওয়া আছে। The defects associated with duct during rotation, that is vitelline duct abnormality. Vitelline duct abnormality আমরা আগে আলাপ করেছি, এটাকে মেটাল ডাইভার্টিকুলাম হিসেবে আমরা বলেছিলাম। Vitelline duct abnormalities of some sort occur in 2%, near 2% of all live births. Note that these aberrant structures are almost always found along the ilial portion of the GIT. These are vitelline ligaments, vitelline cyst. এর সাথে অ্যাটাচ করতে পারে এই যে আইলিয়ামের সাথে সাধারণত মেটাল ডাইভার্টিকুলাম বা ভাইটালাইন ডাক্ট থাকে, এবং সেটা আম্বিলিকাসের সাথে কমিউনিকেট করে ভাইটালাইন লিগামেন্টের মাধ্যমে, এবং অনেক সময় এটা ভাইটালাইন ফিস্টুলা করে, এটা ভাইটালাইন ফিস্টুলা। মেটাল ডাইভার্টিকুলাম ডাক্টের পারসিস্টেন্স which is connected through the ilium to the umbilicus. There may be vitelline cyst, there may be vitelline fistula. These are the abnormal communications while the persisting of the metal diverticulum or vitelline duct. So diverticulum may arise from any part of the gut. Diverticula are most common in and near the duodenum, pylorus, fundus of the stomach. Metal diverticulum, it is known as diverticulum ilii. Persistence of microintestinal duct, it is of surgical importance, may contain pancreatic tissue which may later create Jollinger-Ellison syndrome. It may contain gastric mucosa, here ulceration may occur, may give rise to fecal fistula, umbilical sinus, cyst, which is known as enterocystoma or vaginal cyst, which we shown in the figure. There may be fibrous band or abnormal growths. These are the fallacies of the metal diverticulum or microintestinal duct. So the tip, this is the microintestinal duct or the diverticulum. The tip of the metal diverticulum may be free or attached to the umbilicus or any abdominal viscera by fibrous band. So structurally, this is similar to the ileum. Occasionally, oxyntic cells that secrete hydrochloric acid in the stomach, are found in mucous membrane and heterotopic pancreatic tissue in the muscular coat of the vitelline duct. So oxyntic cells that secrete hydrochloric acid and heterotopic pancreatic tissue may be found in the muscular coat of the vitelline duct. So what are the complications? Formation of the peptic ulcer, which may cause perforation of this metal diverticulum. There may be inflammation or may cause peritonitis, and there may be intestinal obstruction. These are the complications of the metal diverticulum which you should keep in mind during examination. So it occurs in 2% of population, about 5 to 7 centimeter long. It is attached to the antemesenteric border, about 40 to 60 centimeter proximal to the ileocecal junction, 2 times more common in male than female. So there may be errors in rotation of the GIT. Non-rotation of the midgut loop, that is, small intestine lies towards the right side of the abdominal cavity and the large intestine towards the left due to non-rotation of the midgut. There may be reverse rotation, rotation of the transverse colon process behind the supramesenteric artery and the duodenum process in front of it. This is reverse rotation. Non-return of the umbilical hernia, what we saw in the figures, that during 90-degree rotation and counterclockwise rotation, when abdominal cavity expands, the herniated portion of the GIT returns to the abdominal cavity. But if Non-return of the umbilical hernia. There may be omphalocele or exomphalus. These herniated parts are covered only by omentum. And there may be congenital umbilical hernia. Muscle layer and skin are absent in the region of the umbilicus, creating a defect. So in omphalocele, it is covered with omentum. In congenital umbilical hernia, muscular layer and skin may be absent. So there may be errors of fixation, which may create volvulus, where parts of the intestine that are normally retroperitoneal may have mesentery, which may cause volvulus. Adhesion, there may be adhesion, where parts of the intestine which normally have a mesentery may be fixed by abnormal peritoneal attachment, creating adhesion. And there may be subhepatic sebum, which we shown earlier, may descend only to the lumbar region. Alternatively, it will descend into the pelvis. And situs inversus means all the abdominal and thoracic viscera are laterally transposed. All parts normally on the right side are seen on the left side and vice versa. আমাদের abdomen এবং thoraxের যে viscera গুলো রাইট সাইডে থাকার কথা সেগুলো রাইট সাইডে না থেকে লেফট সাইডে থাকতে পারে, যেগুলো লেফট সাইডে থাকার কথা সেগুলো লেফট সাইডে না থেকে রাইট সাইডে থাকতে পারে। যেমন হার্ট, thoracic viscera, হার্টের viscera অংশ left side into the right side. তারপর হচ্ছে লিভার রাইট এ না থেকে লেফট এ চলে আসবে, স্প্লিন লেফট এ না থেকে রাইট এ চলে আসবে। এগুলোকে তখন আমরা বলি সাইটাস ইনভার্সাস। ইনভার্সাস মানে উল্টো দিকে। The appendix and duodenum may lie on the left side and the stomach on the right. Therefore, situs inversus There are defects associated with gut herniation and location, which আমরা আগে বলছিলাম Omphalocoele. This is the amniotic cavity, this is the umbilical cord. There are intestinal loops. This is the abdominal wall, intestinal loops herniated in the umbilical cord. This is the amnion, umbilical cord herniated through the umbilical orifice. This is the Omphalocoele. This is covered with all the layers. This is the Omphalocoele. So now, what is gastroschisis? Represents a congenital defect characterized by a defect in the anterior abdominal wall through which the abdominal contents freely protrude. This is gastroschisis. একটা abdominal orifice দিয়ে weakness দিয়ে the total intestinal coilটা বের হয়ে আসে। So this is the congenital defect characterized by a defect in the anterior abdominal wall through which the abdominal contents freely protrude. This is gastroschisis. This is Omphalocoele. This is gastroschisis. In Omphalocoele, it involves the herniation of the abdominal viscera through an enlarged umbilical ring. Here lies the umbilical ring. The viscera, which may include liver, small and large intestine, stomach, spleen, or gallbladder, are covered by amnion. These structures are covered by amnion. This is Omphalocoele. It involves herniation of the abdominal viscera through an enlarged umbilical defect. The viscera, which may include liver, small and large intestine, stomach, spleen, or gallbladder, are covered by amnion. These are covered by amnion. The origin of the defect is the failure of the bowel to return to the body cavity from its physiological herniation during the 6th to 10th. Omphalocoele occurs in 2.5 per 10,000 live births and is associated with a high rate of mortality, 25% mortality, and severe malformation such as cardiac malformation may occur in 50% cases. So, Omphalocoele about 25% is better. It involves herniation of the abdominal viscera which may include liver, small and large intestine, stomach, spleen, and gallbladder. And this is covered by Omphalocoele, this is gastroschisis. Gastroschisis may be repaired by surgical defects. Surgery করে এই gastroschisis ঠিক করা যায়। এখানে তোমাদের বইতেই বলা আছে যে gastroschisis is a term applied to a protrusion of abdominal contents through the body wall directly into the amniotic cavity. Part of the intestine, at the abdominal defector, amniotic cavity. It occurs lateral to the umbilicus, usually on the right, and the defect is likely to abnormal closure of the body wall around the connecting stalk. Viscera are not covered by peritoneum or amnion, and the bowel may be damaged by exposure to amniotic fluid. এর আগে আমরা যেটা দেখেছি যে Omphalocoele ওটা peritoneum বা amnion amnion দিয়ে covered থাকে, কিন্তু এখানে gastroschisis viscera are not covered by peritoneum or amnion, and the bowel are exposed to the amniotic fluid. Gastroschisis occurs in 1 per 10,000 lives. It is increasing in frequency, especially in young women who early বয়সে যদি মেয়েদের বিয়ে হয় সেক্ষেত্রে গ্যাস্ট্রোস্কাইটিস হওয়ার চান্স বেশি। আর এটার সাথে একটা কোকেইন বা টোবেকো বা অ্যালকোহল অ্যাবিউজের একটা সম্পর্ক আছে। যেসব নারীরা বা মায়েরা যদি কোকেইন আসক্ত থাকে ওদের গ্যাস্ট্রোস্কাইটিস হওয়ার চান্স বেশি থাকে। Unlike Omphalocoele, gastroschisis is not associated with chromosomal abnormalities. Gastroschisis is not associated with chromosomal abnormalities or other severe deaths, so the survival rate is excellent. আমরা ওখানে দেখেছি যে Omphalocoele 25% children will die, but in case of gastroschisis, as the gastroschisis is not associated with chromosomal abnormalities or other severe defects lead to the তবে গ্যাস্ট্রোস্কাইটিসের একটা সমস্যা হচ্ছে যদি কোনো কারণে volvulus হয়, মানে abnormal rotation of the blood occurs, which may cause reduced blood and may cause ischemia. The large part of the intestine may die. And ultimately the children, ultimately the baby may die. So these are the abnormalities, rotation and fixation. So now defects associated with guard herniation and rotation, abnormal rotation. Here may be absent or incomplete secondary rotation. There is no secondary rotation. The conditions of the guard are like this. This is the ascending column, this is duodenum, this is the semicolon, the transverse column, the semicolon. There is no ileal loops by here. This is duodenum. And যদি হয় reverse secondary rotation যদি counterclockwise না হলে যদি clockwise হয়, 90 degree counterclockwise primary rotation occurs as usual, but followed by abnormal 180 degree counterclockwise rotation. Net rotation is now 90 degree clockwise. Viscera are in their normal location. Note that the duodenum is anterior to the transverse column. The duodenum lies anterior to the transverse column due to reverse secondary rotation. So derivation of the individual parts of the urinary tract. Ascending colon develops from the post-arterial segment of the midgut group distal to the septal bulb. Transverse colon. The right 2/3 of the transverse colon develop from the post-arterial segment of the midgut group. The left 1/3 arises from the hindgut. Right 2/3 are supplied by the supramesenteric artery, which will show the figure, which we see in the figure. The left 1/3 is supplied by the inferior mesenteric artery. Descending colon develops from the hindgut. The rectum is derived from the primitive rectum, dorsal subdivision of the cloaca. Anal canal is formed partly from the endoderm of the primitive rectum and partly from the ectoderm of the anal pit, which is known as protoderm. And pectinate line, the line of junction of the endodermal and ectodermal parts of the anal canal, is represented by anal valves, which is known as pectinate line. You may be asked in your exam, what is pectinate line? Or what is white line of Rectum? These are the important structures in the anal canal. Pectinate line is the line of junction of the endodermal and ectodermal parts of the anal canal. The pectinate line হচ্ছে ectodermal origin থেকে যে স্ট্রাকচারগুলো ডেভেলপ করেছে junctional line হচ্ছে pectinate line. This is represented by anal valves. Here the defects associated with gut herniation, rotation, volvulus. Metal type আমরা যে ছবিতে দেখেছি fibrous cord with the umbilical fistula is the volvulus. Neck পেঁচিয়ে গেছে, gut পেঁচিয়ে গেছে, the volvulus. This is due to abnormal fixation. Fixation of a portion of the gut tube to the body wall. Subsequent rotation causes twisting. যখন এখানে একটা part of the GIT যদি body wall এর সাথে fixed হয়ে যায়, তাহলে আমাদের নেক্সট রোটেশনের সময় এটা টুইস্টেড হয়ে যায়, পেঁচিয়ে যায়, প্যাচ হয়ে যায়। তখন একটা ব্লাড সার্কুলেশন হ্যাম্পার হয়ে এখানে তখন গ্যাংগ্রিন হয়ে যায়, পসিবলি রিজাল্টিং ইন স্টেনোসিস এন্ড ইসকেমিয়া। এই ছবিতে দেখো ভলভুলাস মেট্রো হয়ে গেছে, ইসকেমিয়া ডেভেলপ হয়ে গেছে, আলটিমেটলি এটা গ্যাংগ্রিন হয়ে যায়, ব্ল্যাকনিং হয়ে যায়, গ্যাংগ্রিন হয়ে যায়। আচ্ছা, নাও development of the hindgut. The derivatives of the hindgut include everything caudal to the distal 1/3 of the transverse column. Transverse column এর distal 1/3 থেকে নিচের দিকে যা আসে এগুলো সবই hindgut থেকে। The distal portion of the sigmoid colon and rectum divide into the anorectal canal and urogenital canal. And in this development, if any error occurs, which can lead to imperforate anus, atresia, and fistula, which we mentioned earlier. As with the rest of the GIT, enteric neurons in the hindgut arise from vagal neural crest, plus some sacral crest. Distalmost portions of the hindgut are furthest away and therefore more sensitive to perturbations in migration, that is, mutations in RET gene, resulting in congenital metabolum or Hirschsprung disease, already mentioned. This is imperforate anus. And here is the imperforate anal. Here is atresia, the atresia, the anoperitoneal fistula. এখানে হচ্ছে rectovaginal fistula, vaginal, এর সাথে rectum fistula, rectovaginal fistula, এখানে recto-urethral fistula, urethral সাথে rectum এর একটা কানেকশন তৈরি হচ্ছে, recto-urethral fistula, আর rectovesical, ইউরিনারি ব্লাডারের সাথে rectum এর যে fistula, rectovesical fistula. These are abnormalities of the heart. In urorectal septum, a wedge-shaped mesenchyme divides the cloaca into dorsal and ventral parts. The dorsal part of the primitive rectum and cranial part of the anal canal. This is the primitive rectum. Ventral part, primitive urogenital sinus, bladder, and urethra. In 7th week, urorectal septum fuses with cloacal membrane. Divide the cloacal membrane into urogenital membrane and anal membrane. Urogenital membrane and anal membrane. In front, urogenital membrane, the urogenital membrane, and behind, this is anal membrane. Urogenital membrane, this is and perineal body. This is the perineal body, line of fusion of urorectal septum and cloacal membrane. The position of the anal membrane represented in adults by pectinate line. So, given আমরা বললাম যে ectodermal এবং duodenal origin structure meet করে যেখানে anal valves থাকে সেখানে একটা pectinate line আছে, সেখানে হচ্ছে anal membrane. Anal membrane pectinate line, যেখানে pectinate line This is the pectinate line. The anal valves, endodermal and ectodermal. Connection between endodermal and this is ectodermal. Here lies the anal valves. These are the anal valves. And this is the pectinate line. In simple columnar epithelium, the stratified squamous epithelium. Stratified squamous epithelium is ectodermal in origin. Simple columnar epithelium is endodermal in origin. This junction is separated by pectinate line. Column, see, column. So rectum above the crystals, third valve, middle rectal valve develop from the pre-atlantoic part, and the crystals valve develop from the dorsal part of the maternal. But the pectinate line are above the pectinate line from the dorsal part of the maternal. Below the pectinate line from the anal column, the pectinate line and the white line. These are anal canal. Then Hindgut will develop this is the তো Hirschsprung disease আমরা অনেকবার বলে ফেলেছি Hirschsprung disease কি হয় কি কি abnormality হতে পারে undivided cloaca যদি cloaca divide না হয় সেটা undivided cloaca rectum fistula হতে পারে rectovesical fistula আর high fistula আমরা ছবিতে দেখলাম rectourethral or rectovaginal fistula এটা low fistula বলে what is high fistula what is low fistula এটা আমাদের ভাইবাতে জিজ্ঞেস imperforate canal ectopic canals. So at the end of the 7th week, the cloacal membrane ruptures, creating the anal opening for the hindgut and the ventral opening for the urogenital sinus. So what are the congenital errors in the anal canal? Imperforate canals is the condition that occurs when there is a failure of breakdown of the anal membrane. This is imperforate canal. Anus perforate করেনি Now neural crest cells from vagal and sacral regions colonize the gut and give rise to the enteric neurons of the myenteric and submyenteric plexus. Hirschsprung disease সম্পর্কে বলে দিয়েছি needle mapulum, Hirschsprung disease, megacolon, like volvulus. Congenital mapulum due to an absence of parasympathetic ganglia in the bowel wall. The ganglion mapulum, Hirschsprung disease, lack of innervation results in loss of peristalsis, fecal retention, and abdominal distension. It occurs in 1/45,000 live birthday একজন বাচ্চার এই হতে পারে caused by failure of the vagal neural crest cells to migrate into the innervated region chronically constricted, upstream region become distended, vertically repaired by wrinkling affected. After surgical removal, it is part of the metaphor. এখানে rectumটা collapse করে গেছে এখানে সবকিছু জমে যায় সব এখানে কোলনে সব আটকে যায় গিয়ে এটা ডাইলেট হয়ে যায় মাধ্যমিকই abdominal distension এখানে কি হয় clear vomiting হয় যেটা আমরা আগেও বলেছি delayed process of responding severe constipation early malnutrition হতে পারে যদি কোনো কারণে বাচ্চা সার্ভাইভ করে দেয় তো সে malnutrition ডেভেলপ করে enterocolitis abdominal distension and power inflammatory bowel disease, the perforation. So now আমরা একটু summary করি lecture আজকে শেষ মোটামুটি summary একটু দেখে নিই তাহলে 16 days of intraembryonic life atlantoic diverticulum starts appear. In 16 days of embryonic life atlantoic diverticulum appears. In 3 weeks the gut begins to acquire tubular shape because of head and tail foldings. In the end of 3rd week, the buccopharyngeal membrane ruptures. During 4 weeks, the fusiform shape of the stomach becomes visible. In 5 weeks, stomach rotates and dilates. Intestinal loop begins to form. Cecal bud can be identified. In 6 weeks, intestinal loop is well formed. Urorectal septum starts dividing the cloaca, toils and appendices become clearly visible, stomach complete its rotation. In 7 weeks, septation of cloaca into rectum and urinary sinus is completed. Intestinal loop herniates out of the abdominal cavity. In 8 weeks, intestinal loop rotates counterclockwise. In 9 weeks, anal membrane breaks down. In 3 months, head and tail foldings are completed. Herniated coils of intestine return to the abdomen. This is the, in short, summary of the development of GIT. So, thank you very much for your patient hearing. And if you have any questions, please send me through the email address I have provided here. Stay safe and be blessed. কালকে আবার দেখা হবে তোমাদের সাথে রেসপিরেটরি সিস্টেম ডেভেলপমেন্ট নিয়ে।